Okay, a couple of housekeeping things. Sometimes you get a little confused with the position paper dates. The position paper folder opens, it's already open, but the deadline isn't until next Thursday, the 7th, all right? So if you've got it already, you can throw it in, and if not, that's fine, all right? So the test will be, it will be Tuesday, but it'll start Monday, okay? So you can log in at 12:01 Monday night and finish it at 11:59 Tuesday night. And that will be when the test is. It'll cover all of this, including what we have here. The position paper, as I said, will be on Thursday. That will cover everything that we've talked about up to this time, okay? All right, so I did a video talking about international channels. And so the chapter was, the last part of this was talking about piggybacking, and I'll talk about it briefly again. So piggybacking is a very useful thing if you happen to have a resource that could be available in another country, but you don't have the distribution channels over there. So an example is like Pfizer or other medical equipment corporations that have basic medications, but they don't have holistic medicines. The medicines that you would perhaps find in the Far East or India or those kind of places. And what piggybacking allows those organizations, such as those in India, to have avenue or access to the venues in the United States. And so what are some of the ways, or how does all of this work together? Well, the first thing is that you got to be in the same industry. So pharmaceuticals and holistic medicine are sort of kind of in the same industry. So that's the first thing you need to have, because that gives you a similar customer base. The second thing is that you don't want conflict of interest. And that's once again where Pfizer and holistic medicines are reasonable partners together. They don't directly compete. Of course, Pfizer does medicines, and then holistic medicines are those basic over-the-counter things. And so that's the synergy. They're in the same group, they have the same base, but they don't have conflict of interest. The big company like Pfizer would receive a commission on the goods that they sell. They would provide warehouse space for the goods from India. It extends their product line, all right? And it saves money and it saves time. It's when a company uses another company's distribution channel, all right? And it's a very equitable kind of win-win situation. That is piggybacking. Reciprocal, or you could also call it reverse piggybacking, it's more often called reciprocal piggybacking, is when you have two corporations with the same thing. They have the same similar customer base, they don't have conflicts of interest generally, but they both have channels of distribution that each other can use. And so I'll give you an example of reciprocal piggybacking. In 92, 93, when the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers came in and exploded in the United States, Bandai, who was the toy manufacturer at that time, needed a venue to get into the United States, not only to the US, but also to South America as well. And so they approached Mattel and they said, we would like to piggyback onto your channels to be able to sell our things. And Mattel says, what a coincidence. We've been trying to get into the Far East for the last 40 years. Let's make an arrangement. And so this is what reciprocal piggybacking was. Bandai used the channels of distribution of Mattel in North and South America, and Mattel used the channels of distribution for Bandai in Japan and China and South Korea, and it worked out great, all right? And this is an example of what reciprocal piggybacking is. Worked great, okay? So piggybacking. So there is an inevitable, inexorable push for retailers to go international. And the biggest reason why is quite simply is that there are very slow growth in home markets, and that foreign markets become very attractive, especially if you follow the classic example when you talk about marketing, or you have same product, new market. And so this is, the reason why you do this. So what are some of the reasons why you go over international? Where it's a virtuous cycle. You get the economies of scale going with growth, where it spreads out. You be able to work more efficiently on your marketing research, IT management. You expand and export across markets. And the expansion also, just by the fact that you cross those lines, you cross and you, in essence, become an international corporation. And that naturally enhances your brand equity. And so this is the reasons why retailers go international. Now, is it successful? Well, not all the time, okay? There are also problems with trying to go international, and here are a few of them. The biggest one is high quality locations. I mean, everywhere in the world, you're generally talking about countries that are much, much older than the United States historically. And so in terms of quality locations, remember in real estate, the three most important things are location, 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 all right? And without good locations, it becomes difficult to expand. The physical logistics, the differences in logistics in the infrastructure can be difficult and confusing. In the United States, the vast majority of things are shipped by rail and then last mile by truck. In Europe, the vast majority of things can be shipped by truck. And the interesting thing is that passenger or rail is more predominantly for passengers. And so there's some differences there. You try and hope for some parallel shippers or suppliers from home, and it doesn't always work that way. But you also have to adapt to differences in operations because of regulations. There can be difficulties in terms of shipping days in working internationally versus within the United States. And then also developing products that are attractive abroad can sometimes be difficult as well. And then the last, in terms of barriers to entry, there are several of them. Some are social and some are governmental. So in terms of one of the more difficult things of penetrating is the Japanese market. Japanese market has a concept known as keiretsu, and it's these long-term enduring relationships that Japan's suppliers have with each other. And that is a natural barrier. It tends to be not necessarily on environmental basis, but that's one of those barriers. Another one can be legal barriers. In France, the tariffs were set up so that it wouldn't cost, exorbitant amounts to ship, but they could make those goods sit on the docks for months. And so even though there's this natural growth, there's still difficulties that make growth difficult. And it's also important to understand is that many times they're cultural as well. So Walmart tried to expand into China, into the Far East, into Europe. They did a miserable job in Europe. And I think much of that quite simply is that the European culture would refuse to accept Walmart. Walmart was successful in China because Walmart is in essence a trading partner of China. Walmart does very well in other countries, But there are enough, societal differences that make that difficult as well, all right? So they didn't do well in Argentina, but they did do well in other Central and South American countries as well. So there are many reasons why that there are barriers that make it just difficult for international expansion. When you look at the retail model, which is Walmart corporate opening the store in another location. Franchising, however, once again, franchising is actually doing quite well. Franchising has challenges, but by the very nature of franchising, in which you have local feet on the ground that are willing, you have the franchisee who lives and works in a given location with this connection to the franchisor, it's actually made for success when it comes to international operations, okay? There are lacks of legal precedences in some places regarding franchising operations because they are relatively unique, but franchising overseas is the best of both worlds. So you remember when I talked about franchising, I talked about how the filet of fish came from Louisiana because there was local feet on the ground in the franchises in McDonald's who noted that people eat fish on Friday. Well, very much the same thing in franchising and overseas. The franchisers overseas have a much closer connection to what people find acceptable. And so you find franchisees changing the model, tweaking it a little bit, and still being successful. So I went to a Pizza Hut, Dr. Albison's my wife. We went to a Pizza Hut in Stockholm, and it was a sit-down dinner environment, all right? So you go to Pizza Hut, they have white tablecloths, you get a bottle of wine, and your pizza comes up, and you have utensils on the table, and it's like a regular dinner theater kind of place, okay? That's the model that works in Sweden. It doesn't mean that they don't have pizzerias where you buy by the slice or anything like that, but that's an example how a local franchise can kind of tweak the model, all right? So I'll give you another example. So one of those, I don't want to say truisms, but one of those sayings that you go along with is that Asian cultures are not fond of cheese. Okay, that's kind of one of those things. Is it always true? Perhaps not, but it's one of those things you talk about. When they did, I wish I still had the bag. When I went to South Korea, and I had read about this, so they were looking for Cheetos. They wanted to do Cheetos in Asian cultures, so they did a taste test to see what Cheetos would survive in China and Asia and Japan. The winner was Kobe beef. So in other words, you had Cheetos without cheese, all right? And I had it. I had the Cheetos. It was so fun. Anyway, there was a franchisor in Thailand that said, I'm going to start a Pizza Hut. And they said, go ahead, it's your money. And they were wildly successful. And that's one of those things when you have feet on the ground with a franchisee, you can take risks that perhaps a franchisor or a retailer might not take. And so franchising, it's natural, it's growing, it's great, it's perfect. So there's actually 3 models for international franchising, 3 unique models. They are direct franchising, area development franchising, Okay, area development franchising. And then finally, master franchising. So how does it work? Direct franchising is the recruitment of individual franchisees themselves. This is the traditional model. This is franchising as you would have it in the United States, where a corporate franchisor in the United States is seeking independent businesses, let's say Thailand, for lack of a better word. And what they're doing is finding individual corporations that are willing to pay the franchise fee and do everything that you would do in the United States. Area development franchising is, I've got this area, let's just say it's all of Thailand, okay? I have all of Thailand and I award one corporation the right to open as many franchises as they can in that area within a 2-year time frame. And so Bangkok, all the other places, they would open multiple franchising. And in essence, what this is it's multi-unit franchising, where they choose one franchisor, franchisee, and that franchisee has exclusive rights to franchise across that geographic area. The last, well, no, there's actually 4. I keep forgetting this. Master franchising is a little bit with a twist, okay? So master franchising, you have the franchisor here, let's just say in the States. You have a franchisee in Thailand, okay? They get the rights. This franchisee not only can open their own stores, but they can recruit sub-franchisees. So in other words, a franchisee can act as a recruitment tool for the corporation. So an example would be Pizza Hut corporate in the United States gives Thailand Pizza Hut the right to not only open their own stores, but act as their agent in recruiting other sub-franchises. This is a great model, especially when this franchisee understands the territories around. They can choose the right people, the ones that are not only willing to work, but have the money to work. In whatever arrangements that they have that are reasonable, that can work together in a positive way. So master franchising is the ability to have a franchisor with another franchisee with other sub-franchisees under them. It also allows that the franchisors don't have to go out and spend a lot of money. The franchisee, the master franchisor, is going to be doing all of that work for them. And once again, it's also over a given geographic area. Now, the last, joint venture direct franchising, is something similar to what Starbucks does, okay? So in a joint venture, Starbucks and let's just say Coffee Incorporated, they come together and they create a third corporation, and this corporation runs all of the coffee stands in all of the airports in South Korea. A joint venture usually is when two corporations come together to form a third corporation. And so actually you could say Starbucks and you can say Incheon Airport come together to form Coffee Incorporated to do all the coffee inside of the airports in Korea and South Korea, okay? So what works best, it depends a lot also on the economic area that they're in. Direct franchising certainly works in developed nations. The area development franchises and the master franchises are excellent ways, especially if they're cultures that the franchisor is uncertain about. So if you're going to go to Poland or Chechnya or any of those other places where you're just not quite sure of the way that things are going to work, the area development, the master franchising is the way to go. So we're going to pass over all of this conversation because he didn't really do a good job of it, and I'm just going to go over it, okay? So don't worry about all of that stuff. And we're going to finally find our way to talking about omnichannels and global marketing, all right? Despite all of the difficulties over the last 2 or 3 years, when you stack up COVID, stack up all of the difficulties with inflation, with uncertain economies, there are still good news that are coming out ultimately that makes us pretty confident of where the future is going to go. I think if you also look at the emerging cryptocurrencies, we're looking at a way where we can guarantee some authenticity and security even in uncertain times, all right? We're finding that especially with international corporations, that with the omni-channel, those retailers are thriving as they've never had. So India's D-Mart and Flipkart. Flipkart actually, I believe, was bought by Walmart. Flipkart is the Indian version of Amazon, all right? And it has allowed them to put a global footprint down where they would not have had that particular reach before. I ordered a couple of t-shirts from Etsy from the IT crowd, and they were made in England. I'm still waiting for them. But that's an example, is the expansion of the omnichannel leaves you optimistic. And so here are some of the reasons why. One of them is you have younger populations, you have the adoption. I wouldn't even say adoption. I would just say the entrenchment of smartphones. Those are good predictors of the adoption of new forms of shopping. And if we've looked at anything over the last 2 years, all that it's done is to cement those possibilities in our minds, all right? What we also find is that individuals, young people such as yourself, often leapfrog to the newest of innovations as well. And so I can see very quickly and easily the adoptions, and you've already seen the adoptions of cryptocurrencies, but you'll also see the adoptions of non-fungible tokens as well. You're going to find those all together, and you find that retailers are going to bring those innovations. And when innovation passes through, what happens is that competitors are forced to do the same thing. And with all of that traffic, it incentivizes e-commerce, and you find them in the most unlikely places. I found advertisements for NFTs on Etsy, of all places. And when you're starting to penetrate into that, I haven't seen if they're on Amazon, but I wouldn't doubt if they would be, all right? And once again, all of these reasons to be optimistic, the best ones of all usually have to do with the younger population, all right? So they talk about 350 million Chinese use online food delivery. The population of the United States is 340 million, just to give you an idea of the absurdity of the numbers. What are the difficulties? knockoffs and counterfeits are certainly going to be there. I think though, with the advent of Web 3.0 and non-fungible tokens, I think that you're going to see let me find the right words. You're going to find that the strength of authenticity and reliability to be stronger than ever. And I think it's that realness that you're finding come along with Web 3.0 that I think is going to lead to a very promising future. Now, of course, e-commerce does not guarantee buyers. Just because you have something to sell doesn't necessarily mean that there are people who want to buy things. Just remember this, when you're asking what is the price of something, the price is what anyone is willing to pay for it. And if someone is willing to pay for it, fine. But it doesn't mean that there are. So Jack, crazy guy for Twitter, his very first tweet sold for $1.5 million, all right, non-fungible token. But then again, who wants to buy someone else's tweet, all right? Just remember, it doesn't guarantee buyers. What it hopefully does is it guarantees you commerce. And we're finished. We finished fast. I did a lot on that first lesson on Tuesday. So just remember, we have the test coming up Monday, Tuesday. The next position paper is online. I believe it's on autonomous vehicles. And after that, I will see you on Thursday, and we'll be starting on to our last few chapters, okay? Have a good one. See you guys. Thank you. You bet. I'm good with that.